Trying to make more sense of your family business? Let's talk about it.
Welcome to another episode of Making Sense of Family Business. I'm John Kempfield, the Family Business Solutionist, broadcasting from Melbourne in Australia. Today I'm talking about spousal influence. It's an interesting cause of conflict. The difference between success and failure for a lot of family businesses is how they manage conflict. And introducing new spouses, partners, expanding the family group, changing the family dynamic, always presents some challenges which some families are not terribly well equipped to deal with. The point of this video, like all the others in the series, is to help make sense of family business by exploring the causes of conflict, making them easier to understand where they come from, and suggesting some strategies and solutions for dealing with them so your family business and your business family don't get damaged, don't get stuck, don't get upended by conflict. If this sounds interesting to you, let's get on with it. Now, there's no question that a spouse can be a powerful influence in many ways, and particularly at a domestic personal level, on a family member who's a member of a business family, and particularly if they're also involved in the family's family business. The big question is, are they a good influence or a bad influence? Because coming from outside the family, they can be absolute angels. Fresh views, objectivity, new ideas. They can also augment the partner they get involved with. They can support them. They can amplify their strengths, minimize their weaknesses, provide them with a sounding board, be a confidant, help them to make sense of what's going on in their lives, give them a good domestic basis, and as part of a growing family, give them a real purpose for turning up for work, for committing to the long term, for making things happen the way they should. That's a good, let's call them the good spouse. And when I say spouse, I'm including partners, whether or not they're married. There's another side, a darker side to it. There are bad spouses. There are people who marry for different reasons. They may be needy in themselves, and they may see a weaker and more vulnerable family member as somebody who will look to them for instruction the same way that family member has always looked to their own parents for direction and instruction. That tends to make for a bit of a messy situation altogether. Bad spouses tend, rather than to augment and strengthen and improve their partners, they diminish them. They're a bit like the Harry Potter Dementors, milder version thereof, but they suck the strength, the self-regard out of the family member. They get involved, they intercede, they reinterpret, sometimes because they've only got one side of the picture, but they reinterpret stuff that's happening in the family to the detriment of their partner and create outrage. They can seriously wind people up to go back in and create conflict in the family business. They can isolate them from the family. We all know about the new girlfriend or the new wife who ring fences their partner and cuts them off from their family, cuts them off from their friends, basically claims them for their own, and makes themselves the centre of their universe, which is okay up to a point, but not if it means they become the sole person in that other character's life, and they then influence them to do things they wouldn't and perhaps shouldn't otherwise be doing. Good spouses reduce conflict. Bad spouses create conflict. They demonize the rest of the family. They drive a horrible wedge between the family member who maybe dutifully and perhaps unimaginatively has always sort of gone along with the family, and now the family becomes the enemy. And that can have horrendous impacts, of course, in family unity, succession plans, inheritance, all those sorts of things. One of the problems is limited communication. If the spouse works in the family business and they come back and talk about their perspective of what's been going on to their detriment, and their spouse does not have the total picture, doesn't have the full set of facts, then the line of least resistance and the line of loyalty is to support the outrage and perhaps to amplify it and make it even greater. That leads to unbalanced positions ultimately, because the reinforcement that the weak family member needs is being given to them, and so they start to believe their own narrative, their own interpretation, because they are not strong enough to get things actually right and stand up for themselves, so they tend to blame rather than get things right. We could say there are a number of critical roles that could define a spouse coming into a business family. They could be a protector. They could be somebody who looks after the family member they've married or they've partnered up with, and they protect them against the rest of the world, the cruel fates, the overbearing parents and all the rest of it. Improves their well-being, but maybe doesn't help overall with the family dynamics in the long term, because it's simply not real and it's not a solution, it's just a temporary comfort. They might be interpreters. They may actually say, well, have you thought that what you heard may mean something quite different, and how about taking this on board? Again, that can be constructive or it can be destructive, depending on how good they are as an interpreter and what their motives are. They could be a booster. Boosters have ambition. They want their man or their woman to be lord of the castle, leader of the business, leader of the family. So they encourage them, they push them like crazy to step up, whether or not they have the ability and the attributes and the experience or any of the other qualifications to be in a leadership position, but they boost them and they tend to make them irrationally believe in themselves until they either break through or crash to earth with a resounding thump. So again, it can be a good thing, but it can lead to very bad outcomes. Some spouses are natural diplomats, and they are really, really good at creating peace in the whole family. They often become a bit of an unsung hero because nobody wants to admit that somebody who's married into the family is actually bringing peace to the family that the family itself couldn't organise. That can create jealousies and can create resentments from other family members who feel they should have been in that role but didn't do it for whatever reason. And finally, they could be the advisor on the shoulder. They can be the person who talks to their family member and maybe other family members and explains to them, what they should be doing, what they're getting wrong, and what they could be doing differently. And again, if they're good at it and if they are justifiably competent, that can bring massive value. I've certainly worked with families where the best thing about the family members is they married spouses that were much smarter than they were, and given unfettered authority, you'd have wanted to put each of the spouses into the most senior roles in the business because they would have made an incredible team. They had their own careers, they weren't interested in doing that, but they were very happy in supporting, and the spouses were quite a few families have been quite a lot more impressive than the family members themselves. Why wouldn't you use all the assets available to the family to get the best possible result? It just isn't part of some family's psyche, I guess. Then we need to talk about the gold diggers. Now, the idea of the gold digger is somebody who targets a family, finds a vulnerable family member, devotes themselves to becoming their best buddy or their life partner, in some cases I've worked with, have even actually had children with them. But the whole thing was a cynical ploy to get deep into the family confidences, know exactly what the family was worth, create a family law scenario where they might get a substantial payout on separation from the family member, or worse, once they were deep inside the family's confidences, they might even dig up some dirt and then even blackmail the family for a substantial settlement. I've worked with a couple of families where they had gold diggers who devoted some years of their lives and produced 2 children in one case. And it was quite clear that the whole thing was a cynical exercise in finding a mark out of whom they could extract enough money to set themselves up really quite nicely. The second type would be the needy spouse, and I mentioned these briefly early on, that come in as a dominator. They've come in because they have their own emotional insecurities, but they find a family member who's been crushed by the entrepreneurial parents who've just basically gone at a million miles an hour, and they have emotionally damaged all of their children who could never hope to live up to their demands, could never satisfy their standards, and could never achieve as much as the parent had achieved, and therefore they feel very inadequate, and they're just looking for somebody to take them over, as the parents have dominated them in the past, to dominate the rest of their lives, because that's the only model they're really comfortable with. That's a pretty sad place to be. But if we look at all of these things, is the spouse really the problem? I don't think they are. Be it male, be it female, it doesn't matter. They are not causing the problem. The cause of the problem that they are then taking advantage of is the family's lack of a governance system for the family that, were it adequate, the family would use to induct each new spouse into the family system, explain the rules and procedures, introduce things like binding financial agreements as a family policy rather than as a personal "I don't trust you" sort of message. And just to do that would certainly sort out the gold diggers pretty quick smart, rather than leave them in there for years, tucked in like the proverbial Alabama tick, unable to move them when they finally worked out who and really what they were, or when the gold digger was ready to move on and just wanted to dump the family member and place their demands about a payout. But if we come back to the lack of governance, the governance has the rules, the procedures, the communication, the meetings, the validation, the assessments, all of those things. If you don't have them, then the spouse potentially has free slather, the same way that if there's no governance, family members can make up their own rules, make up their own plans, fabricate stuff, or try to leverage promises that may well have been made but were never intended to be kept. What are the strategies and solutions that can be used to make sure that good or bad spouse is either welcomed into the family, made a fabulous part of the family, improves the family, increases the family, and basically everything is good? Or if they are a bad spouse, how do we deal with them? How do we manage them? How do we prevent them from doing huge damage? A lot of the spouses I've spoken to have said, this family unit is so tight, we never feel we're let into the inner sanctum. We always feel like we're bolted onto the outside. Now, some of them will actually extract, through the mechanism we talked about earlier on, they will extract the family member from the bosom of the family, put them on their backs on the outside of the family bubble, and they have now actually essentially diminished the whole family group, because they've created a huge tension by literally pulling a family member out and putting them on the outside of the bubble with them because they haven't been allowed in. that becomes a sad space. So what can families do? The first thing is they need a plan. So many of these causes of conflict come down to, when we're looking at preventing them, if there was a plan, this wouldn't be able to happen. Because the family would know where it's going, how it's going, who's doing what. It gives far less space for people to just jump in and grab whatever they want to. Once there is a plan, you automatically say we need to set up governance structures and systems to achieve the goals in the plan. What could be more natural? The family systems include policies that deal with things like onboarding spouses, providing them with opportunities to participate in the business if that's intended, talking about their inheritance rights, and that leads into the binding financial agreements, which would say you can't attack the family business or the family's wealth, but we will make reasonable provision for you in return for your giving up your rights to do this attack. That will neutralise to an extent the gold, depending on the deal, will neutralise the gold diggers. But more importantly, it says this is a disciplined family that's not going to take any nonsense. So if the new spouse was thinking of doing something unpleasant, it might give them a significant cause for pause, because they would understand the family's going to come down on you like a ton of bricks if you're not here to do the right thing, and if you don't do the right thing. On that front, it's important that if you get a sniff of bad vibes, trust your gut and initiate some process to deal with it. May be very hard to do from within the business, which leads me to the next point, which is it's a really good idea to appoint an independent chair for the family council or advisory board, because in situations of things like spousal frictions, you can get a non-family person to come in professionally, empathically, sensibly, but very firmly to deal with the problem. The final thing I'd like to say is that if you have plenty of family meetings, you have family councils, and you don't exclude the spouses, you have family forums and you bring the spouses on board, you give lots of opportunity to demonstrate you're serious about bringing the individual into the bosom of the family, it gives you an opportunity of A, maximising the chances of a successful marriage, but B, also assessing the spouse. And if you get a feel that things aren't quite right, you need to then follow that through and examine their history, their motives, their rationale, all of those sorts of things. If you found this video useful, please give us a like. Please let other people know that you think might benefit from it, and I hope we'll see you back here again next week. From John Kempfield, the Family Business Solutionist, thanks for watching.